What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be breaking down some of the best routes and press releases you guys can use in one-on-ones. So I hope this video helps you guys out. Hope it could teach you a few new things. But also, fellas, if you are a wide receiver and would like to train with us this offseason, we are going to be traveling out to 8 more states across the U.S. for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps. Next up on our camp tour, we're going to be coming out to Honolulu, Hawaii. That camp is completely sold out. Then we'll be coming out to Boston. That camp is also completely sold out, but then we'll be heading out to Cleveland, Ohio, Austin, Seattle, Newark, Denver, and Los Angeles. So if you guys want some more information on that, how you can sign up when we are coming to a city near you, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to have you out to one of our off-season camps. Let's get started with this video. So now, first thing we're going to be talking about is how you can beat a patient DB in one-on-one. So by patient DB, I don't mean that DB that's going to come off the line and try to shock you off the line of scrimmage, jam you, be super physical. I'm talking about a DB who is patient, who starts to inch back, who keeps a cushion between the wide receiver and himself. So let's play this example first speed. There's a wide receiver out of Dartmouth. This receiver does a great job attacking this DB's leverage, closing the space, and threatening him even when this DB is patient. So a patient DB, this is a technique that this DB uses called like kind of an inch back technique, where it's almost like a back pedal, but he just slowly inches back to maintain a cushion between him and the wide receiver. Now, when a DB does this, he is trying to honestly force the wide receiver to pick a release, so he could almost use like that catch method, if you will. What a lot of young wide receivers will do is that when they get a DB who inches back like this, they'll make a move and they'll just try to run around the DB. But when this DB keeps a cushion like this, and let's say you have to run a fade route, and there's a big gap, he's just going to cut off our fade, get right into my hip, and force me all the way to that sideline. So anytime that there is cushion between me and the DB, I need to close that cushion. So off the line of scrimmage, this wide receiver, and I'm not going to pretend like I'm in his head, but probably off the line, he's thinking, okay, I'm going to attack him, I'm going to close space, threaten him inside, then go fade. Now off the line, he comes off, does a little hesitation step, and sees this DB starts to inch back. That changes the release. You can't just, okay, I picked a release, I'm just going to jab to the inside because that's what I picked, and then go. A lot of times playing the wide receiver position is all about reaction. So when we see that DB start to inch back, we got to take that cushion. He wants to keep some cushion. Let's eat up the cushion. So this wide receiver changes the tempo of his release. He runs to the DB. He closes the space. He steps on his toes, and then he threatens him to the inside with this move. That is exactly how you would have to play this. Fellas, we never want space between me and a DB. I want to eat up that space, and I want to make him extremely uncomfortable. Because now, look what happens. He has plenty of space for the quarterback to fade him on the throw. The quarterback completely sells this play, but because we ate up the cushion, we at least gave him an opportunity to throw me open. Because a lot of guys, they will attack, like I said, and try to run around. But when you try to run around and that DB's got the correct angle, we will not be able to get open. So fellas, against a patient DB in one-on-ones, using a reaction form release, giving a little bit of a hesitation step to start your release so you can read the DB is a great way to get open. So let's play this again, full speed one more time. Great job of this wide receiver closing that cushion and then threatening that DB to the inside. So now, this next example is going to be a great release to use against an inside shade coverage DB who doesn't inch back, who just sits right there. And I call this kind of like a step release, if you will. So it's an explosive step with your back foot directly at the DB. You can do like kind of a foot fire and then a jab to the inside. So it's a way to threaten the DB, change tempo to get his feet to stop, and then obviously attack his leverage. This is a very, very creative release. So let's watch what this wide receiver does here. He comes off the ball, he steps, jab to the inside. So again, I'm going to play it one more time full speed so you guys can see. He comes off the ball. It's an explosive first step. He steps, jab. And that jab is a great way to threaten that DB's leverage, obviously, to make him think we're going to the inside, but also to close the space. Because again, so many young wide receivers, they know that, okay, this DB's inside shade, this wide receiver has to run a fade, right? And a fade is probably the most popular route in one-on-ones. Everybody wants to run a fade. Everybody wants to get in that foot race and make a big play downfield. But not a lot of people do the steps necessary to get them separation off the line when running that fade. So everybody knows, okay, I'm going to try to give a jab to the inside, make him think I'm running a slant, get him to jump, and then take the outside release. But again, just because that DB doesn't inch back doesn't mean that there still might not be some cushion there. So a lot of guys will just come out of their stance, give a quick jab, and then go run. They try to get in this foot race. Fellas, you got to understand, if you don't actually threaten this DB to the inside, close the space, make him uncomfortable, a disciplined dude is not going to move. And anybody that's playing that Division I college level, not saying that they don't need work, but anybody at that D1 level, anybody at that NFL level, those guys are all disciplined. Those guys are all great athletes, and they will make you pay if you don't take these necessary steps. So this step release is so great because you step at the DB, you kind of threaten him, you have some speed with your step, and then you hesitate. But now, guess what? You close the space. You got into his frame. You made him uncomfortable. And so now we can really start to threaten him. We can make it look like a slant. So anytime that you guys are doing a press release in man coverage, you have to understand that a DB is watching one place and one place only, and he is going to be watching your hips. So when a DB is watching your hips, you actually have to sell the release with your hips and with where you're stepping. So you see how he steps? I always use this analogy because it helps me. You want to think of press releases like you're driving. So you got the DB, he squared up the DB with that step release, and now you got this DB in the middle lane. Then you got the far right lane, and then you got the left lane. You were trying to make a lane change to the left, but we were trying to get this DB to move to the right. So the only way that you were going to get him to move is by actually stepping to the far right lane. There comes a time in every single press coverage rep where a DB has to commit to something. He either has to commit to the route he thinks you're running, or he has to commit to your leverage. And if we can actually step outside of his frame, not outside of my frame. This wide receiver may have reached a little bit far, but stepping outside of his frame, you bring the hip with the foot. Your hips and your shoulders sell to the outside. That is what's going to make him more likely to jump. Because remember, his sole responsibility, just like how our responsibility is to get open, his sole responsibility is to protect the inside. Do not give up the slant. So let's actually threaten him with that slant, and that is what can get us more space and more separation back to the outside. So number one thing, you always got to close that space. Never leave that cushion between you and the DB. But number two, to threaten him, we actually got to step outside that frame and sell with my upper half. That's the only way we will get a disciplined DB to go. A scrub, I'm not trying to get you ready for. I'm trying to get you ready for a legit guy who has been coached and he knows exactly what to do in press. How do we beat that? And that's my goal. So let's play this full speed one more time. Great job of this wide receiver threatening to the inside to create that space on that goal line fade. Okay. So now, next example we're going to talk about here is how you guys can properly use a hesitation move on your route. So a lot of guys, you see it in all the freaking rivals videos, all the opening videos, all the different camps that there are out there. You see wide receivers come out when they have off-man coverage and they'll do all this pointless footwork. You know, they'll cross their feet over. It looks like they're dancing almost. Then they'll make a move. And the first thing that all the critics will say is that that doesn't work. That's not going to work in a live game. And probably 90% of the time they are correct. But you see it all the time. NFL wide receivers use a hezi move. They'll kind of slow the tempo of the route down. So how do you actually do that, and when's the right time to do that? And that's what we're going to be discussing with this clip. So this wide receiver is going to be running an out route. It's going to be like maybe a 5 to 6 yard out route, and he's got this inside shade off man coverage look. So let's play this full speed and let's watch what he does. So he comes off the ball here, gives a little hesitation move, this skip, and is able to create space. So this is something that I recommend when you are probably not running a like 10-yard timing speed out. So like, let's say, for example, you know, you're running a 5-yard out, a 10-yard out. Maybe it's a concept where it's like a sprint out play. Let's say the quarterback is here. He's doing a play action fake. He's sprinting out and you're running an out route. And then maybe we have something underneath it, kind of like a flood. The outside receiver's running a fade. That's probably the only time I would like to use this, because if you're running that out route, like let's say you're from the slot, quarterback is taking a 3-step drop and you have a 10-yard out, outside receivers running a fade. But this 10-yard out is like a timing speed out. Like you're rounding the out route. You're not taking your time at the break point. You don't want to use this because that is going to throw off the timing with the quarterback. So you just got to know when to use it. It's okay to work it. It's okay to rep it, but you have to know the right situation. So you see how this wide receiver comes out, and again, full speed, then he gives this little hesitation skip, right? That little skip right there is just a change in tempo and allows him to throw that crossover to threaten his leverage and to get some speed out of that break. So why do you want to do this? Why wouldn't he just run up, give him a fake to the inside, and then go? Because as a wide receiver, especially if you're a wide receiver who's maybe on the smaller side of things, maybe on the slower side of things, you don't necessarily have the physical attributes, you got to be very, very creative. And that's something that's going to help you stand out, right? If you're in a camp situation, like let's say, for example, you're a high school wide receiver and you go to a college camp, but you don't pass the eye test. Like you're just, 5'9", 165 pounds. You think you're a really good receiver, right? You just need one chance from a guy and you'll make it happen. But it's hard to stand out in those environments. Even it's hard to stand out even if you have really good film in those environments because you don't pass the eye test. They're looking for those guys that are 6'4", can stride out a 4'5", heavyweight. Like they're looking for those guys. But to stand out, you got to have some creativity. And so that's why you would change up tempo, number one. Number two is so this DB doesn't get your timing down, right? Because there are probably a couple times where this wide receiver has come off because, again, we got inside leverage off man. You got to run an out route. That should be easy money. You want to attack this DB, you threaten him inside, then you create that space to go run to the outside. Now, what if he gets used to that? What if every time you stem to the inside, he expects the outside breaking route and he just can lock this thing up? We're being predictable. So that change in tempo kind of changes his tempo a little bit. You come off the ball, you come out full speed, and you hesitate. Now, that hesitation gets him to think twice. That stops his feet. That stops his back pedal. He's kind of anticipating what you might do. Then we throw a fake, and we're out. Now, again, you could also set this up from a fade. You come out, you run full speed, you hesitate for a second, then you go run a vertical. Now you come off, you do the exact same thing, you hesitate for a second, and then you throw a move. It's all about making your routes look similar so this DB is always on his toes. He's never guessing correctly what we do, and that's the name of the game with separation. So number one, you have to do it for creativity. You got to make sure you know the right situation to do it. And number two, you do it to throw off that DB's timing so we can remain unpredictable. Let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. Great job by this wide receiver properly using that hesitation skip. If you guys got one thing out of that, fellas, it is that you do not want to use that when it is a timing 10-yard out. You want to use that when you're like a later read on the play. Usually they don't throw out routes late, but it's probably like off of a sprint out, a play action where it's not thrown before you make that cut. Okay, so now, next example I want to talk about here is a situation that a lot of wide receivers struggle with. I've seen it at the camps that we do. I've seen it online at different camps. When you get a bigger physical DB, so many wide receivers, number one, that you could just tell by their body language coming up to the line of scrimmage that they're afraid to get jammed. But I think every wide receiver is a little hesitant at times, right? You got a DB crowding the line. He's right up in your face. What can you do against a guy who's doing that, especially if you're on the smaller side of things? And that's what we're going to discuss. So this first release is going to be called a step back release. So a step back release is one of those things that's heavily criticized because everybody says that, oh, that's not real. You're never going to use it in a real game. But I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to be frank. A DB who comes at you and lunges like that is never going to do that in a real game either. So if he wants to play unrealistic, so can I. We can also play unrealistic because at the end of the day, it's about getting off press. And if that DB wants to guess the snap count, almost lunging at you before the ball even moves, then we got to have a plan for that, right? So let's play this full speed. This wide receiver's running a comeback, and he starts with this kind of step back release to create some space and be able to get some separation. So you see how this DB doesn't even lunge at him, but his body language makes it look like he's going to lunge at him. So again, playing the receiver position is a lot about reaction. It's almost like you're playing basketball out there. You're dribbling to the right, a defender jumps to the right, you cross over and go left. That's kind of how you want to treat that press release. Because, fellas, I think it's so dumb when DBs play like that, where they just lunge at you and choke you off the line because there's no threat of a run, number one. And like so many wide receivers get so caught up in this, and that's why I talk about this, but there's no threat of a run in one-on-ones, or in 7-on-7 for that matter, usually. And then there's no threat of a hard count either. In a real game, if a DB lunges at you and the ball is not snapped, that's a penalty. We got 5 yards, and I guarantee you he will never do that again. So if you're struggling with this, like let's say you're in practice, let's say it's spring ball, and you got this DB who's just punking you off the line every time, upperclassman type guy, you come off the line, tell your quarterback to go on too. Because if he wants to play unrealistic, we can play realistic and show him how it's not going to work. That's number one. But number two, that might not always work. Maybe he times the snap count, he's going to lunge at you. This step back is a great thing to do. Because you step back, you're creating space for yourself, right? You're on the ball right here. You step back, you create space for yourself. So now, guess what? There's that cushion that we were talking about in the very first example, that second example, and what do we have to do with that cushion? We have to close the cushion. We got to make him uncomfortable. Let's go try to step on his toes and threaten him. So now he keeps his leverage to the inside, and I got space to operate. And even if he does, like let's say, for example, instead of inching back and I react off of that, let's say he does lunge at me. He lunged, but when he lunges and he reaches out with his arms, he is going to be off platform. He loses his base. His feet are going to be narrow, and all it takes is a quick swat and go. Fellas, against that physical DB, you know a guy's going to be physical. Maybe you've seen him go against other guys, or maybe you just know the guy, or you know just by his body language. You got to have a plan. I cannot stress that enough. You can't go up there without a plan and just react. You need a plan, and then we need to be able to execute that plan. Let's play this thing again, full speed one more time. This is a textbook example of that step back and creating space for yourself to eat up that cushion, and you could do that, honestly, fellas, on any given route. All right, fellas, I really want to thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions at all, please don't hesitate to leave those in the comment section below. We always appreciate the feedback. It's always great to hear from you guys. And again, fellas, if you would like to come train with us in 8 more states this offseason, check out that very first link in the description below. We'd love to get you out to one of our off-season camps. I'll see you guys next time.